So welcome back to part 3 of embellishing a store-bought canvas. So the last time in part 2, we were working on adding the stem stitch with beads to these. There's like little lines here that you can see. It looks like little scribbly sketch marks sort of things. So I wanted to really emphasize some of the lines, not all of them. You can see here in the colored section, there are more lines that I haven't decided what I'm going to do with these yet. I know that I want to get some colors down first, and so I didn't want to put these lines on top of the canvas without having a plan for these colored areas. So I just went through. I also added a lot of backstitch with beads. These are the 3 threads that I used. So this is the spaghetti. This is a 12 weight cotton from Wonderful Specialty Threads. It's fairly thin, and this is what I started off using over here. You can see these lines are just slightly thinner than the lines that are over here. Once I started going with this, I realized that I did want a thicker look with the lines. And so there you go. There's your permission to switch things up as you are working on them. I do it all the time. You may have already switched your plan from what you originally started with. Totally fine. And that is part of the free-spirited nature of this sort of embroidery. So then I also used these 2 colors. They're not, you can see they're both a darker gray, 2 different shades of gray. These are size 5 pearl cotton, and I wasn't sure how the size 5 was going to work with this canvas, but once I saw that I was having no problems at all with the 12 weight thread, I decided to go a little bit thicker and had no problem also stitching through the canvas with this thread. Now, this took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to take me. Don't mind this thread. This is for what I'm going to show you today. This section all along here, you can only see partial areas of my stitching, and you can see how thick this frame is. This is what took me forever. There is a lot of stitching that is like, this is all frame right here. I'm trying to feel, so this is all frame here. So all of these stitches, I had to angle my needle to get them under the frame and through the canvas, which was just, it was a more delicate sort of process to do that. And so it just took a little bit longer. I love the result, and it was definitely worth the effort. Like you can see over here, there was more frame here and down here. So it did take a lot longer than I originally intended for this piece to take, but I'm glad that I took the time and spent a little extra time to really make sure all of those areas were covered in stitches. I also used, this is the John Bead Sequins and Beads kit, and I will put this in the link below with other supplies that I used. This was great. I used these 3 color beads. I'm probably going to be using these sequins also. You'll get to see that probably in one of the other parts of this. And again, I'm saying that now, but I might switch up the colors, and there's a lot of color going on here. My one idea that I'm thinking is that I do want something here in the white, and so I'm going to show you a stitch today that I'm looking forward to trying over here. Just a little accent stitch. Once I have that stitched, I think I might go back then and add sequins, but I'll get to that part. So right now, I've finished for now my area around my area of back stitching and stem stitching with beads. And so I want to fill some colors in. I've got lots of chunks of color. I know that I want to look for, I'm sure if you've seen the original painting, there is an earring here. I'm looking for a larger bead or embellishment for there. So that's probably going to be one of the last parts of this project. But right now, again, like I was saying, I have larger areas of color that I want to fill in. And so I am going to show you, it's a laid stitch that you can work on larger sections like this. So I have tutorials on my YouTube channel with lots of embroidery stitches. This is the lattice stitch or the trellis stitch. I use them interchangeably and they are known kind of as the same stitch. So what this is, it looks woven, but it's not. I first went through and added long stitches. They're just straight stitches going horizontally across this section. And you can see I kind of tapered off a little bit up here. And then the second step is to add long straight stitches that go vertically over this section. And then you're going to go back through and anchor these stitches down. And that's what I'm going to show you now. So right here you can see I've done the first two little stitches. I'm going to go every other stitch on this row. And then on this next row, I'm also going to do the same thing every other stitch. So these little cross stitches where it's a half cross stitch that I'm making over the horizontal and vertical stitches, they are basically to keep those stitches in place. That's why it's called a laid stitch. Nothing is being woven. Now I'm getting into the part where it's a little tricky around the edges. So I just have to be aware of my needle because right here is going to be behind it's going to be touching the frame part. So I'm going to just do that stitch. Now, every trellis stitch can look different. I could do lines like this that go across every single area where the threads cross. I could do that, and then I could also add a little bead inside each of the squares that I made. I'm going to go back through, and now I'm going to do every other one the same exact way. The yarn that I'm using for this, you noticed it looks a little bit thicker. This is a needlepoint yarn. This is a Koigu needlepoint yarn. It's a fingering weight yarn if you're a knitter or crocheter. So it's one of the thinner yarns, and this is stitching just fine through the canvas. Part of this process was to experiment and find out what threads work really well and what threads show up on a canvas. And I can say that it is no problem to stitch with a fingering weight yarn. So if you have little scraps of yarn, or if you are a multi-crafter and you are a knitter or crocheter and have this in your stash, pull it out and give it a try. I think it looks great, and I love seeing the texture of this here. It's also a variegated color, which means that the color changes throughout the yarn. This is a hand-painted yarn, so every skein would be slightly different. I think that's a great yarn to use for this because you can see these sections of color are multicolored and they have a lot going on. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to add this stitch also probably in the blue section, and I'm going to add little bits of it in the darker green section. So the beauty with a project like this, it's already complete. When you bought this canvas, or if you painted your own canvas, it's complete. There's nothing that needs to be done to it. Anything that you add is a bonus, and it's putting your personality on it. And so you don't have to feel like you need to go overboard with this project. I just wanted to say that this is, if you're stitching and you decide like, this is really heavy to hold, or it's just getting annoying to stitch, figure out how you want to end it, and that is good enough. And you can enjoy the work that or the time that you spent stitching what you did. So don't feel frustrated with this project. Stitch as much as you want and know that you are putting your mark on it, and then hang it up and enjoy it. So speaking of enjoying it, one thing that I love, if you follow me on Instagram, you know that I love color, I love sparkle. I have this is the packaging for them. These are from Michaels, they're bead landing. They are flat back Austrian crystals. So I have this, this one has 74 pieces. This is like a gray color, which I'm probably going to use, I'm thinking somewhere around here, because there are like gray blotches. but I also wanted to add some of these green ones throughout here, and I wanted to show you how I'm going to add those. So there's also a glue that comes with it, and this is just you can find it in the same section at Michael's. This is in the bead section. So you're just going to read the directions before using it, and you want to know the area that you're going to be putting this glue on. And so I'm just going to do a few little drops of glue. You don't need a lot. That's just a little bubble. And it comes out fairly quickly, so just be careful with it. But I'm just going to put a few little dots throughout here. And then I'm using little tweezers, and I'm going to do a few of the sizes. So I think I'm going to take one of the larger ones. I might put that here. The large is actually a really nice size. Oops. I press it down a little bit, but you can see when I really pressed it down, it kind of like put a little bit of the glue out. Now I'm going to be covering this whole area with these, so that's really okay. And an alternative to these, if you want some sparkle but you don't feel like the messiness of this, add some sequins. Sequins, I think, are the answer to everything. I mean, look how cool that's gonna look. So I'm just gonna keep going with this. Again, this is the glue that you can find near these flat back crystals at Michael's. I'm gonna let these dry. You can see it adds a lot of sparkle. Now I'm going to come through and add a few more up here, but I want to do some stitching up there first. So I'm just going to work this in little sections. And again, I'm determining what I like and what's working for the piece. And so that's why I'm working in small sections on this canvas. So while that's drying, I want to show you, I've got a large blank area over here, and I'm going to show you a stitch that you can use to fill little bits of area. So this isn't a fill stitch. It can be used as a fill stitch. It's more of an isolated stitch. It is the woven cross stitch. And again, I have a video for this. If you need to watch just this video, I'll link it below. I like to do this as a little, just little accent pieces. So I'm just picking a random spot to start, and I'm going to start by making a cross stitch. I'm using a thicker thread. This is the thickest pearl cotton. This is a size 3 eleganza. So it's about the same thickness, but it's a little bit denser than the needlepoint yarn that I was using. So I just need to be patient with it. So if you're using thicker threads, be patient with yourself as you are bringing them up and down through the canvas. And I am eyeballing my cross stitch. If you've done cross stitch before, like official cross stitch, you know that it's done on a counted Aida cloth normally. This is a free-form cross stitch. I'm just deciding where I want these stitches to be and adding them. You can also do this on fabric if you want to practice this before working on the canvas. Always a good idea. So now my next stitch, I'm going to be going over the cross stitch that I've already done, and I'm going to be extending the bars of the cross stitch just a little bit. So my first one is going to be worked exactly over this X of the cross stitch. I'm not pulling it super tight. I'm going to bring my next stitch up, again extending beyond the bar of that cross stitch. Now I'm going to take my needle, and I've got 2 layers on this cross stitch. I'm taking my needle to separate them, and I'm going below the very first stitch. the first stitch of the cross stitch that you did, and I'm taking my needle through that stitch or through that bar, and then taking my needle and thread down to complete the cross stitch. And you can see it has made a cross stitch, but it's thicker than a normal cross stitch, and you can see the woven appearance that it has. So again, you can rewind this, watch that over and over again. I have a tutorial for it. Practice it. It will soon become second nature. I'm going to scatter these throughout the white section. I might do a few next to each other, like a cross stitch picture. I haven't decided yet, but I might put a few up in the white areas throughout this. So there are 3 things that you can work on. Adding some trellis stitch or lattice stitch to larger areas. You're probably working on a canvas and you might feel a little overwhelmed and you're not sure where to go next. That is a stitch that can fill up a large area. And the nice thing is you're not going in and out of the canvas a lot. You're just making long stitches both ways, horizontally and vertically. And then the only time you're really securing those stitches is when you're going over the little bars to cross that stitch and secure it down. You can add the crystals for some shine. And again, if you don't want to add the crystals, you can add other accent beads. You could add sequins. I'm picturing hanging this on a wall and having the light catch it. And I think that's going to look really cool. And then another idea is to just add a few isolated stitches throughout your piece. And that is what I'm going to do with the woven cross stitch. So I hope you're enjoying this project. This is my summer project. It's not the only thing that I'm working on because I work on a lot of projects at the same time. And so I'm picking it up in between other projects. And I hope that's what this is for you too. And I hope that you're enjoying it. Happy stitching!